Thank you very much, Ken Workington. Yes, indeed, Bob Boni of Northwood Bloodstock. Instead of president and CEO, we refer to him as chief cook and bottle washer, is joining us here this evening. And Bob is the co-owner of Always Be Mickey, a PACE finalist tomorrow, a guy who has his finger on the pulse of what's happening in harness racing. And this isn't your first rodeo with the PACE. You were the co-owner and racing manager of the great Annihilator back in, what, 1985?
1985, yes.
And that was just a tremendous effort he put forth in the PACE. Let's roll it in right now. Bill O'Donnell and the Sulky, and Annihilator was Niatross after Niatross, and Some Beach Somewhere before Some Beach Somewhere. He's ahead of his time.
I would say that, yeah. It was a very exciting night, obviously, especially because the week before, Sam, I don't know if you recall, but he looked like he was going to get beat. And Anxious Robbie, who came first over in this race also, was the one who looked like he was going to go by him. Houghton made a couple of changes, and he was much better, much better.
And that brings me to a question I've always wondered about, and it's been talked about for a long time in the sport of harness racing. Lou Gaida was the owner of Annihilator, and a very dynamic personality, very bullish on the sport. He was very successful in business and kind of ramrodded his way through harness racing too. Did he make Billy Houghton put Bill O'Donnell up to drive, or was it Houghton's decision?
I've been asked that quite often. Absolutely Houghton's decision, 100%. Lou, matter of fact, I think I might have told you this once, called me in half a panic that he got a call from Houghton that Billy had noticed that O'Donnell didn't have a mount in the race, and suggested he felt the horse needed everything at the best, and he wanted Billy O'Donnell to drive him into Wilson, which is what he did.
And that was basically a trend-setting move for catch drivers, because a lot of trainers used to drive their own horses then, but I think people said, wow, Billy Houghton's using a catch driver, and it really kind of catapulted catch driving.
I would say to a certain extent it did, because this is a horse and that was at the top of the game, and Houghton himself was one of the greatest trainer and drivers that we'd had, and for him to relinquish the drive at that point was pretty significant.
Now, Annihilator retired to stud, and he had some success. I mean, he had 4 millionaires. If you look at what he's produced, there were some pretty good racehorses, but he never reproduced himself. A little bit like Secretariat in the thoroughbred game. Why was that?
Well, he had a shorter career, and candidly, he just wasn't a very good stallion. He was not as successful, as very many horses are, as a stallion as he was as a racehorse. You know, of all the things in this business, predicting stallion success is probably the most difficult. And he became one of many that just did not duplicate himself or come close to it. He had a shortened career because he did die relatively early. He got sick, had to be put down, but he still was never going to be a great stallion.
Working for Lou Gaida, working hand in hand with Lou Gaida, tough man to work for and get along with, or was that image that's portrayed in the public kind of
no, Lou had his opinions. Lou would ask a lot of questions, but if you were forthright with Lou, never a problem. Really never a problem. You'd have discussions, and maybe you'd go over things a little bit more, and he'd ask some more questions and more opinions. But he kind of, at times, it was almost a little consensus. He'd speak to a fair amount of people, but there were a couple of people at that point. I would say I was one. Kenny Sieber was one who was very close to him, that he maybe relied on and leaned on a little more. But he was very, very fair to deal with.
And he basically just disappeared out of the business for a while. He has some horses now racing overseas. Did he lose interest in the game, or what happened?
I think, as you see in so many ways, people change, the business changes, the interest changes, the partners change. Lou still follows it a fair amount. I'm still in contact with him pretty regularly. And it just, I think age and moving to Florida, and he just doesn't have that same drive, because Lou's going to be either all in or he's not going to do it. And I think that has something to do with it also.
Well, let's talk about Always Be Mickey, who was a surprising second at his Meadowlands Pace elimination. New driver up, Dave Miller. Let's roll in that elim. Dave kind of protected him on the turn, gap cover a little, but when we come to the top of the stretch and roll it out, you're about 3 lengths back of JKN of Venera, and this horse comes flying. Now, steering has been an issue for him, making brief breaks has been an issue, but he looked really good.
Ability has never been a question mark with him. You know, right from when he was a 2-year-old, right from the first baby races here, and he's had his problems running in, and it's cost him some races this year. There's no question about that. Joe's tinkered with him. I think he's done a terrific job with him, obviously. A couple of changes that were made before that race, different driving bit, and I think if he can continue to progress like that, I think he'll be in the hunt, because I don't think it's not a question of ability with him. If he's in the chase and he can get positioned okay, I think he'll be around.
Well, let's take a look at the field for the Meadowlands Pace tomorrow night. Now, the question is, how do you get in the chase? Because you've got the 9-hole. There's a lot of speed inside of you. It's one of these races where, you know, nobody gives anybody an inch. How do you see the race laying out, and how's Always Be Mickey get involved?
Similar to the Belmont that is always referred to as a jockey's race, I'll call tomorrow's race a driver's race. You've got two of the best drivers going, Sears, Brian, and Tetrick with the 2 and 3 horse, and you know neither of them wants to get to the front too soon. So they are going to dictate so much of what goes on. I'd have to think there's going to be pace in the race, but generally something always seems to happen in these races that you can't count on. We're looking for an honest pace, obviously. Somehow get in there. I think we'll need something to happen to help us. But I just think it's probably as competitive a Meadowlands Pace as I can recall. Competitive in a fashion where it's got high talent. Got a lot of very, very good, very high quality horses here. So I just think if I wasn't involved personally, it's a great race to watch.
And I agree with that assessment. Very, very, very good horses, but not a superstar. I don't think we have a Captain Treacherous in this field, or Annihilator for that matter. I think it's a very well-matched bunch, and you're going to need a little bit of a trip to win it.
Well, I think what you're saying is why I think it's going to be such a great race, because I don't think anybody looks at one horse and says, boy, that's one I've got to, if he gets to the front, I better not pull. I think they'll be racing horses tomorrow night. I think it should shape up to be a great horse race.
And it won't be just the Meadowlands Pace, folks. We have a fantastic card. Let's take a look at the field for the William Houghton Memorial Free-for-All Pace. Now, Captain Treacherous really had no shot from the outside of the Ben Franklin final to get involved on Pocono's speed track over there. No excuses here. He starts inside of Sweet Lou, who's the best older pacer in the sport. I think those two are going to throw it down at some point, and we're going to see a real slugfest.
I would tend to agree with you. I think this is, on the big track, there's no excuses anymore. There's no position, does not have anywhere near the importance. A couple of the key horses drew inside. Sweet Lou has been just sensational. But moving to a big racetrack, a little more movement, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But again, it shapes up as another race where I think the outside horses are going to take big shots here. So I think it'll be a great race, great race.
And we'll see the first matchup between Father Patrick and Trixton in the Stanley Dancer for the Trotters. And I think we've got 2 pages for this field here. The inside horses all look like they're all long shots. I don't know what Sponstead will do with Muscle Network. This horse has changed barns more than I moved when I was a kid every time the rent was due. But this Sponstead guy has just been a master at having horses fit off one qualifier. Do you think he's a factor?
Your Sylvain he was about as eye-popping as possible. Last week. Just tremendous. And he's shown that he does not have to have 2 or 3 qualifiers, as we sort of become accustomed to. So anything he puts on the racetrack, you have to respect.
And what about Father Patrick and Trixton? Father Patrick outside post, Trixton the 12-hole, a trailing spot. How do you think things are going to work out for them?
Father Patrick's last race was tremendous. He had an outside post at Pocono. He worked his way to the front. He's as handsome a horse on the racetrack as you'll see, and he was a comfortable winner. And the night that he won in 50 and 2, if it wasn't the Sebastian K performance, he would have been the talk, because you know, we tend to get a little numb by speed, but 50 and 2 for a 3-year-old trotting colt is about as much as you can ever expect a horse to go. Trixton, I think, is going to be a very interesting race performance for him tomorrow night. Coming from the second tier, he's not going to be in front right away. He's going to be covered up. And coming off cover, I'll be very interested to see how he trots that way, because ability, I don't think anybody can question it. He has the ability to perhaps go with anybody this year. So that shapes up as a great race, just to see how those two develop.
And I'm very sorry that they're meeting before the Hambletonian. I was hoping that would be the first time they faced each other this year, really build up drama for our big race. Bob, Boni, always good to talk to you, always good to get your insights on the game and on the races. And thanks for a few minutes of your time, and best of luck with Always Be Mickey.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sam.
All right, Bob Boni of Northwood Bloodstock with his opinions on the Meadowlands Pace, the Houghton, and the Stanley Dancer. Quick time out, and we'll tee up tonight's action. Hang with us.